You probably hit the gym to get stronger. Or like maybe you're at home right now trying to squeeze in a few quick ab exercises on the living room floor.
Right, just to, feel a bit more put together.
Exactly. Or because you want to protect your back and you think you're doing a really good thing for your body. But, well, what if your go-to core routine is secretly putting this immense damaging pressure on your internal organs?
Yeah, it's a genuinely unsettling thought. I mean, we tend to operate on this assumption that if an exercise makes our muscles burn, it's working.
Right. No pain, no gain.
Right, exactly. But beneath the surface, completely without realizing it, we might be actively dismantling our own structural integrity.
And that is exactly our mission for this deep dive.
Yeah.
We're looking at this massive mountain of clinical data, pelvic health physiotherapy guides, and these really advanced biomechanical studies.
Lots of heavy reading.
So much reading. But we're doing it to answer one incredibly specific but super crucial question for you, which is, can incorrect core exercises actually worsen pelvic floor pressure?
And to really get to the bottom of that, we basically have to throw out almost everything popular culture has taught us about the core.
Totally.
We've been conditioned to think of the core as just the rectus abdominis. Those are the six-pack muscles sitting at the very front of the stomach.
The ones you can actually see in the mirror.
Right, the glamorous muscles.
Yeah.
But clinically, focusing only on those is like, well, it's like looking at the front door of a house and completely ignoring the foundation, the walls, the roof.
Right.
The clinical literature actually emphasizes that your core is a three-dimensional canister.
A canister. Okay, wait, let's unpack this. Think of your torso not as a flat board of muscle, but, I don't know, like a water balloon.
Or a pressurized cylinder.
That visual actually works perfectly because it highlights the physics at play here.
Yeah.
So inside this cylinder, you have the diaphragm, your primary breathing muscle forming the roof.
Okay, got the roof.
Right. Then the deep spinal muscles form the back wall. Then you have the transverse abdominis, which completely wraps around your front and sides like a biological corset. Oh, I love that description.
And finally, you have the pelvic floor forming the base of the entire structure.
Which is wild to me because I always pictured the pelvic floor as just like a simple hammock of muscle just catching the organs.
Yeah.
But the biomechanical research shows it's so much more architectural than that.
Oh, it is incredibly intricate. It's this complex web of muscles, ligaments, and connective tissue that spans from your pubic bone in the front all the way to your tailbone in the back.
Wow.
And it's responsible for physically supporting the bladder, the bowel, and the uterus. I mean, it is the literal floor of your physiological house.
And so, going back to that water balloon analogy, if you squeeze the middle of a water balloon, the water doesn't just disappear.
No, it has to go somewhere.
Right. The pressure has to go somewhere, pushes up against the top, and it pushes really heavily down against the bottom. And that downward force is what the clinical data calls intra-abdominal pressure.
And it's vital to understand that intra-abdominal pressure isn't inherently bad. Like, we actually require that pressure to function.
We do.
Yeah. It happens automatically when we move, and it creates this rigid support system that stabilizes the spine.
Oh, I see.
Without that internal pressure, your spine would just buckle under the weight of lifting heavy objects, or honestly, even just keeping yourself upright against gravity.
Okay, so the pressure itself isn't the enemy then. It's the real issue is how our bodies manage it.
Exactly. The body has a highly sophisticated system for handling those sudden spikes in pressure. Say when you cough, jump, or lift a heavy box.
Right.
The pelvic floor doesn't just passively stretch out like a worn elastic band. It actually relies on a really specific geometric structure to absorb the shock.
Okay.
The biomechanical studies outline this delicate dynamic equilibrium. Basically, there's a 90-degree folding angle inside the pelvis, supported by the connective tissue between the vagina and the anus.
So it's actively redirecting the force.
Yes. It acts like a structural deflector shield. When forceful downward pressure hits that pelvic geometry, the anatomy is designed to redirect those stress vectors backward toward the bony structure of the tailbone.
Ah.
So it shifts the load into the solid skeleton rather than letting it push straight down and out through the vulnerable muscular openings at the base.
But if that geometry gets messed up, maybe from like a birth injury or just aging or chronically bad exercise habits, that 90-degree angle starts to widen, right?
Precisely. The connective tissues shorten, the angles change, and suddenly those stress vectors aren't pointing at the solid tailbone anymore. They're pointing directly down at the weakest point, the vaginal opening.
So the water balloon is bulging at the absolute thinnest part of the rubber.
Exactly. The entire system loses its ability to transfer the load safely. And that unrelenting downward force leads to abnormal stress, the physical displacement of organs, and eventually pelvic organ prolapse or incontinence.
Okay, so if squeezing the sides of our internal balloon pushes all that pressure downward, does that mean classic ab exercises are just fundamentally destroying our pelvic floors? Because, I mean, if you look online, the fitness advice is terrifying.
It really is.
It basically says if you have any pelvic floor issues, you are forbidden from ever doing a crunch or a plank again.
Right. Those exercises definitely get a bad rap in the pelvic health world, but the concern stems from how people typically perform them. Most people do not use the correct form.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they hold their breath or they forcefully push their stomachs out during the exertion.
Which you can actually see the physical result of. Like if you look down while doing a crunch incorrectly, your stomach might pooch or bulge outward in this hard cone shape right down the middle.
Right. That doming or coning is a massive red flag. It tells us the deep corset muscle, that transverse abdominis, just isn't turning on.
So the pressure is just finding an escape route.
Exactly. It takes the path of least resistance. You're widening the gap between your abdominal muscles and actively forcing your internal organs to bear down violently onto the pelvic floor.
But wait, are we like throwing the baby out with the bathwater here?
Yeah.
Because the fitness industry has banned these exercises for people with prolapse, but the clinical data measuring actual internal pressure paints a completely different picture.
The numbers are incredibly counterintuitive, honestly, which is why we have to look past the internet rumors and actually look at the physics.
Okay, let's lay these numbers out for the listener because they totally change the conversation. So researchers place sensors inside the body to measure the exact pressure on the pelvic floor in centimeters of water during different daily activities.
Right, and the baseline measurement for simply standing at rest generates about 24 centimeters of water pressure on the pelvic floor, just fighting gravity while standing still.
Okay, so 24 just standing there.
Yeah.
Walking around bumps it up to 26. And a forceful cough is a whopping 136.
Which is a massive violence spike.
It is, but a classic abdominal crunch on a mat.
Well,
If you do it while breathing correctly,
it only generates 12.4 centimeters of water pressure.
12.4. I mean, that means a proper crunch creates half the pelvic pressure of just standing in line at the grocery store.
I know, it's wild.
And standing up out of a chair generates 79. Doing a crunch is literally safer, pressure-wise, than getting off the couch.
It completely reframes how we view physical rehabilitation. But, and this is important, we have to highlight the crucial caveat in that data.
You're right, the form.
Exactly. If you perform that exact same crunch while holding your breath, the pressure instantly doubles.
It spikes immediately because you've essentially trapped the air inside the canister.
Right. That breath holding is known as the Valsalva maneuver, where you bear down during exertion, and that is what spikes the internal pressure dangerously high.
Wow.
So the exercise itself isn't universally bad. The danger is the incorrect execution of the movement.
Well, and if getting out of a chair or coughing generates significantly more internal pressure than a gym exercise, then telling mother she can only do gentle anti-gravity stretches forever, it doesn't make any logical sense.
No, it doesn't prepare the body for the reality of daily life. I mean, if she has to chase a toddler or lift a heavy car seat, she needs a core that can handle sudden, massive spikes in pressure.
Right, she needs actual functional strength.
Exactly. Limiting her to low-level exercises leaves her completely vulnerable when she actually has to, live her life.
So if incorrect form and breath holding are the real culprits, what exactly are we doing wrong in our daily habits that ruins our ability to manage this internal pressure?
Well, we need to look at the two distinct types of pelvic floor dysfunction outlined in the clinical literature, because most people assume all pelvic floor problems are caused by the muscles being too weak.
Yeah, like the hammock is just too loose or stretched out from pregnancy or, chronic coughing or heavy lifting without good form.
Right. That describes a hypotonic or weak pelvic floor. The muscles and connective tissues have lost their endurance, so they can't contract reflexively to support the organs or close the urethra when you sneeze.
But the clinical sources talk extensively about the exact opposite problem, too, a hypertonic pelvic floor. And I think this is a huge misconception for a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if I hear my pelvic floor is tight, my first thought is, great, it's strong.
Yeah.
A tight bicep is a strong bicep.
Right.
Doesn't tightness equal fitness?
It's a very common misunderstanding. But in this context, a hypertonic muscle isn't a strong muscle. It is a muscle in spasm. It is chronically contracted and essentially always switched on.
So it never gets to rest or reset.
Never.
Hmm.
And a muscle that cannot relax, cannot coordinate properly, it becomes completely exhausted. Because it's constantly clenched, it can't lengthen when it needs to, like during urination or functional movement.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, walking around with a hypertonic pelvic floor leads to chronic pelvic pain, deep cramping in the buttocks when you try to run, and just severe dysfunction all around.
So it'd be like walking around all day with your shoulders scrunched tightly up to your ears, and then wondering why you can't lift a heavy box over your head. Like the muscle is completely burned out before you even try to use it.
That's actually a great way to think about it. And this chronic tension ties directly into a major cultural habit, which is abdominal hollowing.
Oh, the sucking it in epidemic.
Yes.
We all do it. You put on a swimsuit, or you want your jeans to button comfortably, and you just aggressively suck your stomach in towards your spine.
And it is disastrous for your core mechanics. The physiotherapy guides clearly contrast this harmful hollowing with correct abdominal bracing.
Okay, what's the difference?
Well, when you intensely hollow or suck your stomach in, you are physically flattening out the natural protective curves of your spine. Going back to our water balloon analogy, you're squeezing the very center of the balloon inward as hard as you can, which forcefully drives all the internal pressure straight down.
So you're actively fighting against that 90-degree angle that's supposed to act as your shock absorber.
Exactly. You're entirely overriding this system. You also create a sequence mistake in muscle activation.
What do you mean?
In a healthy core, the pelvic floor is supposed to engage reflexively just before the deep transverse abdominal muscles kick in. It anticipates the load. If you fail to activate the base first and just aggressively suck in your abs, you leave the floor completely vulnerable to that sudden downward spike in pressure.
Wow, okay. We really have to distinguish between core strength and core tone here,
Yeah.
because we use the words interchangeably, but doing 1,000 aggressive crunches might build voluntary strength while completely wrecking your involuntary tone.
Yes, they are fundamentally different neurological processes. Core strength is your voluntary capacity to consciously execute a movement. Core tone, however, is involuntary.
Right.
It is the natural resting tension of your muscles when you aren't thinking about them at all. It's the automatic engagement that keeps your stomach relatively flat and your organs supported when you're just standing around without you having to consciously suck anything in.
So if you're always holding your breath and bearing down during workouts, you're basically training your nervous system to manage pressure improperly, which destroys that resting tone.
Exactly. You're creating dysfunction in a system that is designed to be completely automatic.
Man. Well, we know we need to manage this pressure better, but the answer isn't to just quit exercising and lie on the couch.
Definitely not.
In fact, the medical guidelines explicitly warn that being sedentary actually increases the odds of developing pelvic floor dysfunction. So for you listening, you don't have to give up running or lifting weights or feeling strong. We just have to relearn how to operate the machinery.
Right.
So how do we start rebuilding that foundation safely?
Well, the clinical consensus is clear. It starts with modification, not elimination. If a traditional floor plank is causing that doming shape in your stomach or causing pelvic pain, you don't permanently stop planking. You modify the load. You swap the floor plank for an elevated wall plank. You swap a floor crunch for a standing crunch. You reduce the pull of gravity until your deep core muscles can handle the load without failing.
And the absolute golden rule that echoes across every single piece of research we looked at. Exhale on exertion.
Oh, absolutely. It is the most critical, immediate fix anyone can make to their movement patterns.
Yeah. If you are lifting a weight, standing up from a chair, or pushing open a heavy door, blow the air out. By exhaling, you allow the diaphragm to lift upward, which naturally gives the internal pressure a safe place to escape, rather than trapping it and forcing it down into the pelvic organs.
And there's a very specific nuance to mention here for heavy lifters. If you are doing advanced strength training, say squatting near your maximum weight, you actually do need to perform a Valsalva maneuver. You have to hold your breath to brace your spine safely under that extreme external load.
Right. You can't just casually breathe out when you have 200 pounds on your back. Your spine needs that pressurized cylinder to stay rigid.
Exactly. But for those athletes, managing that intense pressure requires highly specific coaching. They have to learn how to keep the pressure high in the chest cavity and diaphragm without letting it bear down into the pelvic floor. It's an advanced skill.
But for the everyday person, just remember to exhale on the hard part. But, there's another fascinating solution in the physiotherapy sources that approaches this entire pressure problem from the complete opposite direction.
Yes.
It's highly utilized in Europe, and it's called low-pressure fitness, or hypopressives.
It really completely flips traditional core training on its head. Conventional core training, even when executed flawlessly, still generates positive intra-abdominal pressure. Hypopressives aim to create negative pressure.
And when I read this, I was immediately skeptical. I mean, we mentioned earlier that a gentle crunch generates about 12 centimeters of water pressure. Hypopressives claim to drop the intra-abdominal pressure to negative 50 millimeters of mercury.
Right.
Is this just some kind of fitness gimmick? Like, how is it physically possible to create negative pressure inside the human body?
I know, it sounds like a gimmick until you understand the respiratory mechanics behind it. It relies on a specific sequence of postural alignments combined with a targeted breath hold technique called an apnea.
Oh, wait.
So you exhale completely, emptying your lungs. Then, without letting any air back in through your nose or mouth, you perform a false inhale. You mechanically expand your rib cage as if you were taking a massive deep breath.
But because your airway is closed, no air can actually get in, which creates this massive vacuum effect inside the torso.
Yes, that vacuum effect physically alters the pressure gradient. It involuntarily draws the diaphragm upward into the rib cage, and the resulting suction literally pulls the pelvic floor and the pelvic organs up along with it.
So instead of the water balloon being squished downward from the middle, it's being gently pulled up from the very top.
Exactly. It avoids the downward pressing sensation entirely. And more importantly, it stimulates those involuntary muscle fibers we talked about earlier. It helps restore that baseline resting core tone, basically resetting the neuromuscular connection without requiring you to consciously, voluntarily squeeze anything.
Some of the specialized fitness systems provide a really visceral visualization for how you want to feel when you are engaging these deep muscles properly. Whether you're doing Pilates, modified crunches, or just walking,
Right.
they say to imagine you are gently drawing a tampon further up inside you. It shouldn't feel like you are bearing down or pushing outwards or aggressively sucking in your navel. It should be a subtle upward, inward tension.
And finding that specific sensation is why knowledge is most valuable when it's applied correctly. The key to returning to exercise isn't following a list of forbidden movements. It's starting with proper breathing mechanics, finding that deep core connection using those internal visualizations, and progressively loading the system over time.
So, synthesizing everything we've uncovered today, let's return to our original mission. Can incorrect core exercises worsen pelvic floor pressure?
The answer is a resounding yes.
Absolutely. If you are habitually holding your breath, sucking your stomach in aggressively to look thin, and ignoring that coning shape in your abs during a workout, you are absolutely compromising your structural integrity. But the vital takeaway here is that the villain isn't the crunch itself. It isn't the plank.
No. The villain is poor coordination and a fundamental misunderstanding of the physics inside your own body.
Exactly. You can safely do crunches. You can safely run and lift weights.
Oh, yeah.
You simply have to learn how to operate the machinery of your core cylinder the way it was designed to function.
Right.
Now, to leave you with one final thought to mull over, there was an incredible detail hidden deep in the clinical physiotherapy guides that shifts this entire conversation into new territory.
Oh, this part is fascinating.
Right. We spent this entire deep dive talking about mechanical pressure, the physics of lifting weights, coughing, doing crunches.
The structural load on the system.
Right. But the clinical sources note that the pelvic floor is intimately connected to our nervous system and our baseline sense of safety. Psychological trauma, daily anxiety, and chronic stress can directly cause a hypertonic, tightened pelvic floor because your brain is constantly telling those muscles to stay in a state of protective, clenched contraction.
The body keeps the score, quite literally, in the muscles of the pelvic floor. It physically manifests the stress you are carrying.
Yeah. So if you are out there breathing perfectly, modifying your planks, and executing your workouts with flawless mechanical form, but you are still experiencing pelvic pain or dysfunction, well, you have to ask yourself, could your nervous system and the invisible mental stress you are carrying around every single day be the hidden source of your pressure?